I was born in 1944 in the United States, and I was a teacher for many years, and I also wrote articles for nudist magazines. And along about 1990, I started going to hippie gatherings like Confest in Australia and Starwood and Free Spirit Festival in the United States. And a lot of people went nude in these places, and I got the idea of making video of the nudist activities and making videos which I could sell through the nudist magazines that I was always writing for. The beauty of that was that my ad would be seen by people who were already interested in the subject. They were what you call a target audience. So I started making videos about people at the hippie gatherings that were doing yoga and meditating and all that sort of stuff. And I continued. I lived in Byron Bay, which is kind of a hippie town, so I continued making videos with people in Byron Bay who had a nudist aspect to their life. And I called, for example, I made 2 videos called Naked Lifestyles. Like one woman, when she got up in the morning, she would mix herself some aromatherapy oils and rub it on her body, and that was how she started her day. I was raised in a very comfortable kind of family. My parents were not particularly religious. They were a little bit strict about any kind of nudity. I know very early in the piece I did some nudes with my camera, sent them to them, and they were a little bit shocked by that. That was but they were quite permissive, and they were very supportive. They helped me go to university, and then I studied for a PhD in English literature, because I love poetry and reading, that sort of thing. But that wasn't very useful. So I got about 2/3 of the way through that, and I quit, and I went to Australia to become a high school teacher. And I also did an undergraduate degree in physics, so I was kind of a double threat. I went to a school that needed a physics teacher for only a couple of classes, and then I taught the rest English, and that was very pleasant. I enjoyed teaching English and maths and physics for about 15 years. But meanwhile, I was doing nudes with the camera, not with the video, with the photographs, and keeping that naturally a secret against from my parents and from the schools I was teaching in. I made my first naked pictures with a girl named Kate, an Australian girl that I met when I was serving in the Peace Corps in Malaysia at the age of 25. That was 1969. And my dad gave me a Polaroid camera. He wanted me to be sure and take a few pictures of Malaysia and the school and that sort of thing. I don't think he had the Polaroid photos of Kate in mind, but of course I didn't have to. With a Polaroid, you don't have to take it to the local shop and get it developed, so it can be done completely secretly. So, and then I continued making nudes right along whenever I could find a model. So I enjoyed, but that was just photography, that was not video. In order to take pictures of Kate, I had to kind of convince her, but we were lovers, so she was okay about that. And then after that, it was the 70s and the 80s. It wasn't that hard to find models. There was a big advantage because there was no internet. The girl didn't have to worry if you did nude photos of her that suddenly everybody in the world was going to see them. So I think people were much more open. The girls were quite free about having nude photos done. And of course, I think girls really quite like being photographed in the nude, or at least a lot of them do. They know they're pretty, and they know they're attractive, and people like that. So I don't think there was any problem. The problem now, as I say, with nudes, is that the girls are afraid you'll post the stuff on the internet, and then a lot of people can see it. Even when I started making videos, they were only sold on VHS in the 90s, and then DVDs after that. But the only person who would see them was the guy who bought the VHS or bought the DVD. And he bought it because he wanted it, so he obviously wasn't going to disapprove of them. And there weren't going to be very many of them anyway. It was only when the internet came that the things, and of course camera phones and all that, everybody had his own camera all the time. That became, it's much more difficult. But still, this urge that girls have to pose because they want people to see them as being pretty, and they're proud of their good looks, that's still very strong. I remember Kate once, she was a bit dubious about the whole thing, but she said, I see you looking at those pictures and I realize it really is important to you. I remember she said that. She thought it was all kind of silly, but I would take the picture and I'd be sitting there looking at it for 10 minutes and wondering if I could do better, and so it really was just kind of in my blood that was what. And I actually remember much earlier than that, when I was, I think, about 11 in grade school, we did a study on a geography study on the Southwest, and you had to make a little booklet of all the pictures you could find in magazines of the Southwest. And Nevada, I got an article on Nevada that had a picture of Lily St. Cyr performing in one of the nightclubs in what they described as her bubble bath act, which she performs clad mostly in spotlight. And I cut that picture out, and the other side had a picture of the geography or something like that. So it was in the book, but I left it a little bit so you could look underneath and see Lily St. Cyr. So it goes way back for me. That was that was my beginning, and yeah, it just seems to be natural. Some people have this urge to look at photos and do photos. I taught as I say, I taught for about 15 years, and then there was a gap in my life. My mother actually had Alzheimer's, and I needed to go take care of her. And that was 1990 when I started going to the hippie gatherings. I could leave her for a few days because we had other people looking after her. And I would go off to the hippie gatherings and start making video. And once again, the people there were quite keen. There was no problem getting models. I remember I saw one girl who had just fallen in love with a guy who was a professional acrobat, and he was doing stunts with her, throwing her around, swinging her around, standing on and she loved the idea of doing video of her. Doing video at that time. And then I had my real breakthrough. I got the idea of going to France to make videos of the naturist resorts. And I actually saw an article in a magazine by a guy named Doug Ball, who'd visited several French resorts in 1993. And so I wrote to Doug, I said, Doug, well, let's go together, I'll pay some of your expenses and you can introduce me to all these different clubs and we'll make videos, which he did. And those videos were very popular. That's really got the business started, because I sold at least 1,000 of each of them at $50 a piece, and I think one of them got up as high as 2,000 in selling. And the third time, I went 3 times to France, 1995, 96, and 97. And the third time, I began to feel a little self-conscious about asking all these people to model for me, because after all, they were on their holiday, and you couldn't really push them around or anything. So I took Rochelle along. She'd modeled for me in Byron Bay, and she filled in when I needed a shot of something with a naked person in it. And that's where I got the idea of traveling with girls. I realized that was a much simpler and very pleasant way to do it. So I started, I got Uti to go to Greece with me, and we would do shots of her at the beach or in the swimming pool or whatever. And I made a video called Surrender to the Sun with Uti going nude at different beaches and that sort of thing. I think I published about 150 videos. There were only about 40 that I actually got certified by the censorship board so I could sell them in Australia. But on the internet, once the internet opened up, I could make them freely. And I think I'm up to 150 videos now. I remember I brought out the first 2 French videos, and I actually did a mail out to all the customers who'd already bought from me, and that they could have both videos for a special price, or I would throw in a third one. And I remember going to the P.O. box about 3 or 4 days later And it was so full of orders I could hardly get them out. They were all stuck in there. And I thought, and I actually sold, I mailed out 100 requests, and I actually sold 51 videos from the 100 requests. I got the biggest, I think that's about the highest percentage for a random mailing that has ever been. And that's when I realized that there was, you know, this wasn't going to be just a hobby. This was something for real. I once, yeah, I had a very bit of good luck with the BBC. There was a man in England named James Scarlett who was selling my videos for me, and he got in touch with the movie studios, and there was a show called Christie's Home Videos, and Christie wanted to buy some nudes to spice up her shows. So I sent basically, and they could be low quality. You could just send them a VHS tape, and because they were supposed to be home videos, you see. And she bought $24,000 worth of shots from me, because in the professional market, of course, when they buy footage, they pay like 350 pounds a minute for it. And she had all these segments, and so I got 24,000 pounds, I think it was. And that's where I got the money to take another model, Shannon, to Ibiza, along with her best friend. And we made a bunch of videos called Adventures in Freedom. And it was a lovely challenge. Like, we would go to a beach or an esplanade, and we would have the girls walk naked along the esplanade, or we'd have them be naked we had a nice villa with a swimming pool. And at the end of it, there was a thing called the bungee spaceball, which was a kind of amusement park ride. It was like you sat in this big sphere, and it had two things like this, and it was stretched, and it would go take up in the air. And I said, can we have the girls do that in the nude? And he says, yeah, fine. And he made a video for me. The thing actually had a video camera on the front of it so that you could see their faces as they took off. And that sort of thing is really fun, you know. The girls quite loved it. Did I ever have any offer to jump into the porn world? No, not really. I've never been that inclined toward porn. And of course, when I was selling through the Nudist magazines, I would put an ad in the Nudist magazine, and I had to be very careful, because they would get offended if the videos were too sexy. You know, it's okay to have nude girls, but they don't regard that as sexy. So I limited. And no, I've never had, they've never come to me and said, would you like to make porn? No. Nudists have always had a problem with whether nudity is sexy. The nudist movement really got started in the 1950s or thereabouts, and it was illegal, of course, for adults to be naked in each other's company, even if it was a private grounds. And they were able to win a court case that nudity alone was not sexy. Just simple nudity. That's the phrase, simple nudity, with no sexual. And ever since then, they've been very sensitive about, it's got to be what's called simple nudity, just natural nudity. And of course, the other question, the other aspect of that is, well, maybe simple nudity is not sexy when people like me do it. But when people like Shannon, who's 24 years old and gorgeous, does it, maybe that is sexy. They've never quite gotten to the bottom of that, really. The nudist magazines still nearly always put a pretty girl on the cover, but they're embarrassed. They don't want to become just a total pretty girl magazine. And they've never really worked that out for themselves. It's a problem. And of course, they would regard me as kind of a failure in that respect, because I gradually went more and more toward pretty girls. When I was going to France, of course, the videos have everybody in them, you know, adults, everything. And then as I started traveling, like with Uti to Greece and with Shannon to Ibiza, it was really just a pretty girl. And that, of course, that means the videos sell, because that's what the buyers want. But the guys who own the nudist magazines are kind of embarrassed by that, because they like to think that nudity is not sexy and that it's all just innocent and, you know, a Garden of Eden stuff. And of course, both approaches have a certain amount of truth in them. So yes, but I definitely have gradually fallen away from nudist ideal and become just a video maker of pretty girls. But the important thing, I think The porn industry has missed the boat. I know that the majority of people who buy porn videos want heavy sex, but I think there's a lot of people, me included, who really just like to see the pretty girls. And maybe they can be a little bit sexy, you know, they can dance sexy. But I think there's a niche, as we call it, a niche of people who are maybe only 10% of the market, but that's 10% of the whole world, you know. So, and I think that's the people that I've satisfied. And I don't think there's anybody else who's doing that. It's very difficult to find. I know, because I periodically look at websites on the internet to find if there's anybody else doing stuff that is A, not too sexy, and B, interesting in a video sense. And there's hardly any. There's very, very rare. You know, you will get videos that just so, it's very common, for example, to see a pretty girl who gradually takes her clothes off and poses for photos, and there's a video camera, you know, shooting her, like 5-minute shot, just one shot. You see that, but that gets quite boring to me. And they don't seem to realize that. They don't seem to realize that there's a middle ground there where you can, you know, you can have cuts, you can have different angles, you can have the girl do something more interesting than just kind of standing there and wiggling a little bit, which is, you know, about, if you eliminate the totally porn videos and then get what's left, I think about 90% of what's left is just some girl standing there posing for photos. The problem with these videos is that they're not interesting. They take it for granted that because you have a beautiful girl who hasn't got clothes on, that's enough. And it isn't. You know, at least it's not as much as you can do. Maybe it is, in a sense, enough, but you can do better by having the girl do something interesting, you know, dancing, exercises, yoga, going to a party, going to a nightclub, walking down the street, going to the beach, playing in a river, you know, playing under a waterfall, floating on a... They don't do any of those things, and they've really missed the boat. So I'm basically the only guy in the world who is doing what I'm doing, and I find that kind of satisfying in a way. You know, maybe not everybody thinks shooting naked girls is all that great a deal, but I am doing something that no one else in the world is doing. The first idea of making video, it was called The Beauty of the Nude, and it was at a couple of gatherings, and it was activities that people at gatherings would do. There was one girl who did a kind of ritual with a maypole, and there was that girl I've already mentioned who met a handsome guy who was an acrobat, and he was kind of swinging her around and stuff. And there was another girl who did Tai Chi, and she had a lovely fur coat, and she gradually took off the coat and just did Tai Chi. And then there was another girl, actually several people, who just were throwing a frisbee around, but in the nudes, because they were free. Yeah, I started practicing nudism probably about, I guess about 1980, about 10 years before I started making the videos. And I would go to clubs. This was while I was in Australia. I would go to clubs like River Island Nature Retreat and several others and enjoy the nudity there. And of course, when I was making the videos in the clubs, like in the French clubs, I had to be nude too. You know, there occasionally somebody will get the idea of making a video about a nudist resort, and he'll show up with a crew who are all dressed. And of course, you don't get anywhere. They think you're a weirdo, you know. So because I knew how to handle it. You know, I knew how to get along with the people. And I'd done articles for the magazine, so I could bring a couple of magazines along and say, here's the article I did. And that gave them the idea that I was genuine. Have I ever been in a relation with a model? Basically, no. 2 or 3 of them, we've had sex, occasionally. But of course, you must remember that when I started this business, I was already 46. And these are girls in their 20s, early 20s. So sometimes they would get a bit turned on, but it wouldn't go very far. And of course, the thing that any good video maker has to realize, particularly in this business, is you're not there to pick up models. There are too many guys in this business who are there, they don't care about the photos, they don't care about the videos, they just want to pick up the models. And that's fatal. That's fatal. It'll kill the videos, and it will probably not result in a good relationship either. Oh yes, I had many long-term relationships earlier in my life, yes. With Kate, for example, we were together for about a year, and there was another girl, Kathy, and when I was in graduate school, and there was Leonie when I was first teaching, and Sandra. There were lots, but they basically, in my experience, and we're talking about 40 years ago, the relationship just wouldn't survive unless you committed yourself to what I call MOM. Marriage, offspring, and mortgage. MOM. At least that was my experience. You know, the relationship would go well for 6 months or a year or maybe even 2 years. But then the crisis would come, and that would be the end of it. So, and as I say, by the time I started making the videos, I was nearly 50. You know, well, the closest, Uti was 35 and I was 55. That's the closest. When I went with Rochelle, she was 28 and I was 53. And there were a couple of people who thought we were husband and wife, you know, because we went to, not just to the club, but to shops and things. But that's as close, you know, and even there it was kind of strange, you know. So, and of course now, I mean, Henriette, I was 56 years older. Shannon, actually, I met on her 19th birthday, and I was 60. So that was fun. That was a lovely story. Shannon, in Byron Bay, they have some pretty wild things going on, and they called the lascivious ball. Lascivious meaning sexy. And Shannon was hired to be like a go-go dancer. They had her on a platform, and she loved dancing, so she was happy. And when she came down, I said, well, I'm going to put on a party in about 3 weeks, which was true. And could you come and dance for me at the party like that? And she was over the moon, making money by dancing. This was, and I learned later that in fact the day I met her was her 19th birthday. She was born, the lascivious ball was on Halloween, October 31st, and that was her 19th birthday. Well, I went to Australia in 1974, and with the idea of staying for perhaps 2 years. The idea, of course, was that Australia was not a place you could just go visit for a couple of weeks. You know, if you were going to see it at all, you should go. So I got a job and saw it. But at the end of 3 years, I decided I wanted to stay. But I did go back, of course. The way I did like when I went to France, I would take a flight from Sydney to Connecticut. I had a cottage in Connecticut. And then I would go to France in July for 4 weeks, and then I'd fly back and then back to Australia. So I was pretty much committed to Australia, but I did spend time in the US each year until about 5 years ago when it got to be, I just felt I got too old for all that flying, and I let the cottage go. I had a home, what they call a home unit, a condominium, when I was teaching. I bought that in 1980, and then when I went to Byron Bay, I bought a nice, lovely little tiny place in 1997 right near the beach. But then Henriette, the Dutch girl that came out, she came over to the US twice to go to nudist resorts, and we made videos about nudist resorts. That was in 1999. And then in 2000, she said she would come out and live with me for 6 months and learn how to edit videos. And so she came over to the US, and we traveled around the West for 3 weeks. That was absolutely lovely. We went to see the Grand Canyon and all the other great places. And then she came out, but I realized neither of my places was big enough to have, you know, somebody like that. So I bought the house that I have now. And that turned out to be a really good idea because it has a great big central room, which is good for shooting video. Not only things like exercises and dancing, but actually having a party where the girl goes naked. So that was what decided me to really settle down in Byron Bay. It was, and that's another thing I've kind of gotten into, was having girls go naked in nightclubs when they're having a big party. At first I had parties at my own house, But then I got the idea of going to a nightclub and having, it was great, I thought, because you've got the music, you've got the girl can dance, she can talk to the people. Sometimes there's a game they can play, like table football, and she can get drinks at the bar. Also, it makes the video much more interesting. So I've done that, and Shannon was the first to do that in 2004. And since then I've done that, I think, about 35 or 40 times. And I don't know, I just have a weakness for that because I love the pop music. I think we live in an age when there's a lot of really good pop music, and particularly when you've got a girl dancing in a nightclub to the music, it just makes it all really good. What jobs have I had in my life? Really just for full-time jobs, just teaching. I was in the Peace Corps teaching, and I taught at a school in Massachusetts 1 year, and then I went out to Australia. And that was the way. I wanted to go out to Australia and stay 2 years, and that was obviously teaching was the way to do it, because you could get a job and teach for a couple of years, and then I moved on to other schools. You asked me a while back about my family, and my father was a very individualistic man, and he taught me that what the general public believes is very often wrong. And so I've never been one, like, general public believes that the natural thing is you meet a girl, you marry her, you have kids, the mom, marriage, offspring, and mortgage. And I questioned that right from the start. And I didn't really think I was particularly suited to it. So that was, as I said before, that was the stumbling block for most of my long-term relationships, because the girls soon realized that probably wasn't going to happen. She wasn't going to get a husband with a steady salary. And of course, once I got into the nude photos, and particularly in the videos, it seemed pretty obvious that you'd be very lucky to find a wife who would put up with that, because you're constantly going on trips with beautiful young women. And even though, in fact, there's not much danger that I'm going to try to, go to bed with them, or nonetheless, most women they would find that hard to accept. So you give up some things in order to have some other things that you really like. Most guys, when I tell them that I make a living by videoing beautiful girls naked and traveling with them all around the world, most guys, their first reaction anyway is, "Ooh, that sounds pretty good." I don't think I've ever had much doubt about it. The greenhouse effect comes into this, and population problems in general. Right in the 60s, population was seen as a real danger. And of course, in the last 30 years or so, with the greenhouse effect, the climate change, obviously all of the causes of climate change get worse as the population gets bigger. It doesn't cause the problem, but everything, the number of cars on the road, number of furnaces in houses, everything that causes the greenhouse effect gets worse as you get more people. So I kind of felt, it's not a duty to have children. It's kind of a duty not to, unless you really, really, I thought if you really, really want to have kids, okay, go ahead, if that's your mission in life. But I think too many people, particularly men, just kind of stumble into it, and then they look around and they think, wow, what's happened to my life? I've got this wife and 2 children and I'm trapped. Got time for one throw for the dog here. Go! You might be interested to know how many trips I've made with pretty girls. And I've never exactly got the count, but it would be around 20, one every year at least, since I started doing it with Rochelle. And sometimes the trips have been like 6 weeks or more. Other times, just shorter trips. Usually 4 to 6 weeks, I find. Shannon and I traveled the most. She traveled with me in 2004 to Ibiza. 2005, she came to visit me in Connecticut. 2006, back to Ibiza. And 2008 and 2009, we went to the Greek islands. So she was my number one. The police. Do I have trouble with the police? Well, if I go naked, if I have a girl walk naked down the street, and a policeman comes along, they will usually say something, but generally they've let us go with a warning. We haven't had any real big problems. An interesting sidelight on that was that in Barcelona in 2010, which was the first time I went to Barcelona, there was no law against going naked in public. Somehow that had been forgotten. They never bothered. They just assumed no one would do it, so they never passed. So I was actually able to have the girls go anywhere they wanted in public, naked. But even so, the police were convinced that there was a law. We met the police 4 times doing that, and every time they stopped us and tried to arrest us, and we had to convince them that we weren't breaking any law. So police, they have a certain mindset. Yeah, you've got to, but if you're really polite to them, and you know, a lot of them are pretty good guys, and they figure this is not serious, and they let us go. But they usually tell us to stop doing it. An interesting thing about the nightclub shoots is that we've never had any trouble at all. And when Shannon first went to that nightclub in 2004, I was very worried that the people, first of all, they might react badly to her nudity, but even more that they might react badly to me walking around videoing everybody. But that's never happened. I don't understand why not, but it has never happened. We've never had any trouble from anybody about video, about making video at the nightclubs. And the only thing I can explain is that I'm clearly videoing the girls. I'm not actually videoing the audience particularly. They get in the shot sometimes. And the other thing about it is that it's dark, so I have a little video light. So everybody knows exactly where I am. And if they are nervous, the easiest thing is to just go somewhere else, because the clubs, of course, are big enough, you know, they have room. So yeah, and as far as going naked in public, which as I say, I don't do that too much. There have been a couple of women who look kind of annoyed, but that's as far as it went. The cell phone has been a real nuisance. It's made it more difficult to shoot. But the interesting thing about naked in public for me is that most people, if you say, oh, I'm going to take a girl and she's going to walk naked down the street, they think, oh my God, everybody's going to go berserk. You know, they're going to be running around screaming and wondering, pointing, and that's not true. It just isn't true. It's amazing. A girl can walk naked down the street and half the people don't even pay attention. You know, and then you do get the usually young men who want to have their picture taken with her. They don't take pictures of her. They want to come up and do the selfie thing and take a picture with her. And that's as far as it goes. And as soon as they've got their picture, they just disappear. So it's a good example. I mentioned earlier that the general public is very often wrong. And that's an excellent example. They have this idea that it's going to be this certain kind of reaction, and it's just not the case at all. You know, it's not that they're wrong, it's just that they have no experience and they've jumped to a conclusion, and it just isn't true. And I think that's rather wonderful, actually. I think it is, yeah. I think definitely over the years it's become a lot more accepted and a lot more normal, except, as I say, that because of the internet and the phones. It is a little harder to get models because they're afraid. Everybody's kind of scared of the internet, you know. Actually, the internet is so big. I think if I were to take pictures of, say, you in the nude and put them on the internet, you know, unless, I mean, if I used your camera so that your friends would find them, yes, but otherwise, I don't think anybody would ever know. None of your friends would ever know. I think it's so big, and I think that's probably true for the girls as well, unless there happened to be some connection, like you know, the camera I used I put them on Facebook, and all your Facebook friends somehow saw you. My favorite country to shoot videos, I like the Greek islands very much, because of the beauty and the beaches. But of course, I've shot quite a lot in the Czech Republic because I have a good friend there who has a good location, and he can help me get models and that sort of thing. The United States is terrible. The United States, everybody in the United States is too uptight. You can't get models. You can't, you know. if you shoot there, they do kind of react if somebody goes naked in public. So, and Australia's great. Australians are really laid back about nudity there. Until the internet came along, it was really easy to get models in Byron Bay. When I first went there, I got my friend to run an ad in the Echo, the local newspaper, for models, and we got 30 people the first week. How do I get models? Well, the ad in the Echo, the local paper in Byron Bay, has worked very well for me. I ran it about a year and a half ago, and I got 2 very nice models, but not too surprisingly, they don't want to be in videos or on the internet. So I've done a lot of shooting with them just for my own personal satisfaction. In the Czech Republic, there are model agencies. You can get through agencies, you can get models. And there the only problem is that they think you're going to do porn, and it takes a while to convince them that, you know, no, we don't want that. We just want you, you know, doing yoga or. We do have a series of videos called Free and Wild. That was actually Uti's idea. She gave me the title, Free and Wild, and they've gradually gotten wilder. The original ones were fairly tame. We did a party where everybody was pretty high, and that's in Free and Wild #1. And Free and Wild #2, Henriette, the Dutch girl who came to live with me, she liked to be tied up, so we did some bondage stuff. So there are slightly sexy, but there's never been any male-female sex in any of my videos, or female-female for that matter. There's been, you know, they've gotten a bit erotic with touching themselves. That's about as far as it goes. Oh yes, nude parties in my place. As I say, my house has a very large central room, and with a balcony where somebody can play music, or, you know, a DJ up there. And we've had about 10 parties, I think. One of them, everybody got nude. They were being paid. Uti was one of them, because there was a guy who ran a chocolate shop, and he offered to bring out some chocolate and paint the models, so we had a chocolate party. And then Lily, we got to talking with Lily, that was in 2007. She's the one who traveled to the US with me. And I asked her whether she would be able to go nude at a party where everybody else had clothing on. And she said, no, that's fine. And she did, and that worked out very well. And we've had a couple of parties where most people went nude, but you didn't have to. And the 2 girls, the Australian girls that didn't want to be on the internet, we had a party last year, and they went nude, but nobody else did. Except one of my friends who tends to kind of get nude every time he can. That's Andrew. So, and I do that whenever I can. And I've got a few friends who are good with music and good with dancing and make a party really go. And that's been a lot of fun. I have another friend, Patrick, and he comes out and we try to find a model, and he and I and the model have a party, sometimes in the daytime, and she just wanders around outside. And I remember one of them, they started using bamboo sticks. There's a lot of bamboo in my yard, and they were using, like, you know, Robin Hood and Long John Silver fighting with the cross sticks. Anything I can think of, you know. In a party, you can have sparklers, you can have these little guns that shoot bubbles, you can have balloons, you can have one very popular thing is, you know, pool noodles, those long plastic things that people use in swimming pools, and you use those to play a game of hockey with a ball, and you whap at them, and that's lots of fun because you can hit each other, and it makes quite a bang, but it doesn't hurt anybody. So, and yeah, we had another party where I set up a slide in the back. My backyard slopes just the right amount, and it you just all you do is you get a lot of foam, and then you lay a sheet of plastic on it, the kind of plastic that you use in the garden to keep the weeds down, and then you just have to run a little soapy water on it, and you go zow right down, and everybody thought that was wonderful. 3 things that I really like. Well, The shooting video, I think, is number one, and eating is number two, and then going for walks. I love in the morning to go for a walk. Byron Bay is a beach town, so I can walk along the beach one way and go to there'll be a little cafe, and I can have lunch or just a cup of coffee and walk back, and there's a beach the other way, and there's several other walks I can do. And that's pretty much what I do. And then movies. I like to watch a movie in the afternoon. So that's pretty much my whole life. I probably should develop some new hobbies or something. I have been thinking about it, and traveling, going on these trips. That's been really good, particularly when I can get a girl to go with me. That's wonderful.
You can do all those things with girls.
Yes. It's like I went to Tasmania with one of the two Australian models in March, and that sort of thing is very pleasant. And so I guess that's sort of the high point. And occasionally marijuana. Get a little high. That's what Patrick and I and the girls used to get into, Get a little high. It's hard to find a model who will do that, but once you once you find the right model, you can have, yeah.
By your style.
Yeah, I met a girl named Abby, and we did a video one afternoon of her and Patrick and me having fun, and we called it Blonde Party, because she was a blonde. And I said, there are some girls who are a party all by themselves. So yeah, I guess that would probably be my most favorite thing to do, is get a good model and have a few drinks or something like that. Well, my favorite model, that's a good question. My favorite model, the most beautiful, was a girl named Gwen. And I videoed her many times. We met her through a friend in 2010. She was one of the ones in Barcelona who went around naked in the streets when it was legal. And she's been in 10 nightclubs. She's the champion of the nightclub shoots. And she's probably the most beautiful girl I've ever known personally. At least that's to me. Of course, different people have different ideas of what's beautiful, but for me, I think the model that I warmed most to was Shannon, because we traveled 5 or 6 times. And she was just as beautiful, and she had that wonderful talent for dance too. So it was always, if I ever ran out of ideas, it was just, let's think of a new way to dance. And then I had Tereska. Tereska's, I think, everybody's idea of a gorgeous woman. She's absolutely, and she loved being naked. She would go naked anywhere. That was no problem. So those are my 3 favorites, I guess.
And what about your favorite movie?
You mean of my own, the favorite movie of my own? I think my favorite would probably be Adventures in Freedom, which is the one I was describing when Shannon and I went to Ibiza the first time, and she went on the bungee spaceball thing. We had 3 girls. We had a Czech girl named Katrina, and her best friend, whose name was Bella. Shannon's best friend. And I enjoy watching that, but I do enjoy watching a lot of my videos again. And of course the nightclub videos, I look at those a lot.
And you like normally to edit videos?
Oh, editing is the most fun. Yeah, that's, well, I guess shooting is fun, but the editing is the most fun. It really comes together, and that's, yeah. I have that in common with Hitchcock. Hitchcock didn't like shooting. He found that kind of boring because he had to work with all these different people. But editing, Hitchcock loves. So I guess Alfred Hitchcock and I do have something in common. Not a lot otherwise. Well, advice for people. Well, I think my father's advice of, the general public is very often wrong. They have these certain ideas, and they believe in them devoutly, but they're like what happens when a girl goes naked in public. They have this whole idea, and it's just wrong. It's not that they're being bad or anything. They just haven't got any experience, and they've jumped to a conclusion, and it just isn't true. So, and I think the question about the marriage thing, don't just go into marriage as something that everybody does, and therefore you're going to do it, and it's going to be the high road to happiness, which is what most Hollywood movies portray marriage. You know, they get together at the end and, oh, they're happy forever now. And pop songs also, you know, the happiness is from finding the right girl or finding the right guy. And don't believe that. You know, it's not easy, and it doesn't always work that way. And there's no obligation on you to live the way everybody else does. If it's not for you, if it doesn't work out, don't get in a big sweat because everybody else is married and you're not, because that may be the best thing. Well, I kind of like to compare myself to Shakespeare. Shakespeare he never published his own stuff. The plays, he just left the plays and went off to live in Stratford. And we also have something in common in that he was in a disreputable business too. Writing plays was a shameful thing to do. Plays were illegal in London. They had to perform them outside London. And women were not allowed to be in the plays because that was too shameful. And so Shakespeare, he just left his stuff, he just left it to the world, and he went off to Stratford, and you know, he didn't want the people of Stratford to know that he'd been doing something nasty like writing plays. And I kind of feel the same, you know. I think the public is wrong that what I'm doing. I think actually I'm providing a very useful service. Okay, let's go. But I just as soon, you know, leave them on. They're on the internet. If you Google a topic like naked girl running or naked girl in the caves or naked, you'll get my video. They're all out there. And plus the 2 websites that I have, which will keep going. And I'll just leave it to that. You know, if they're good, if people like them, they'll survive. And I've done, they're very happy, they make me very happy, I'm very satisfied with them. And I hope that other people will enjoy them too. People's attitude toward nudity now, there's a lot of conflicting attitudes. A lot of people accept nudity, and like my models, they're very free about being nude. It's not the nudity that bothers them, it's the notoriety on the internet that bothers them. That's not a problem for most people. On the other hand, I had a shock the other day when I was after gym, I went into the shower room, and there's a guy who's changing his clothes with a towel wrapped around him, just as if he was at the beach. And it's only me in there. And I thought, what's going on with this guy? You know? So there's, the attitudes toward nudity are sort of going all over the place. But I mean, obviously, if people become more conservative about nudity, that will give my videos extra life, because, you know, they're like relics of a freer age. Already, the videos I made about naturist resorts are historical. You know, there aren't any places like that anymore. The changes have been too great. The Garden of Eden feeling. I'm really glad that I made those when I did, because you couldn't do it now. You know, they wouldn't let you even if there was such a place, and I don't think there is such a place. So yeah, that's and you wonder, well, is it just a pendulum going back and forth? You know, the 50s was very uptight, and the 60s was looser, and the 80s was really loose, and then it goes back, and I don't know. That's really interesting. Maybe with the greenhouse effect, it'll be so hot nobody will want to wear any clothes. Yes, my own feeling about the internet, for example, is on the one hand, it's a kind of immortality, because there's a lot of my stuff. You could probably find everything I've ever made on the internet, I would say. And certainly a lot of it. And some of it, like I say, if you Google naked girl running, one of my videos will be #1, the first thing that comes up. And, you know, it's everywhere. that video. That was Tereska running in the roads. She was a very good runner. She's a very beautiful girl, but also a very good runner because she was an athlete. And I really like the fact that my way of making videos, there's tremendous room for creativity. You know, there's constant opportunities. I know we took Gwen to bowling. Danny and I, my friend in the Czech Republic, and we went bowling. And I got the idea, let's ask the boss if she can bowl in the nude. And he said that was a great idea. He liked that very much. And he even said she should shoot pool and she should also visit my restaurant next door. So it was, and Gwen was a real athlete. She was very, very capable. She looked great bowling. You know, a lot of people look kind of awkward when they're bowling, but she looked great. So that's you know, the constant need to think of new things, but possibilities for new ideas. I like that a lot. One of my models, the one Lorena that doesn't want to be on the internet, she did pole dancing, and she had a warm-up session for pole dancing. You know, a bunch of exercises that she did. And I said, let's make a video of you doing this warm-up session, you know, because it was on the internet. There was a lady there showing her how. And that came out looking really great. She was doing all these exercises and, you know, swinging around. They were very big exercises. You know, she'd be on the floor and she'd be swinging around or going up and down. And that was just great. And it's lovely to keep thinking of new things and never running out of things. Oh, well, I just hope everybody that sees this can be inspired to have a look at some of the videos, and I hope you enjoy them a lot, and that they help to make your life a little bit happier, because they've made my life a lot happier. That'll do it.
Perfect.
Okay.